Chapter 24. 11:15 p.m. Brant gazed down at the sleeping angel beside him. God help him, he was just as much to blame for this mess. He could have done so many things. He could have talked to the news station himself about who supplied the picture of the ring. He could have put the fear of God into Dylan and Kevin, let them know he was suspicious of them. Most of all, he should have beat the shit out of that asshole deputy from her past. He closed his eyes and groaned. Guilt squeezed his heart. Stupid. He'd never knowingly do anything to hurt her. Ever. But just as bad, he'd promised to keep her involvement private and he'd failed. His arm tightened around the tiny woman, who had broken into the locked places in his heart. Lowering his head, he dropped tiny caresses to the side of her face tucked into his shoulder. Unbelievable. He cared so much, and just the thought of anything happening to her made his arms squeeze tighter. With a muffled protest, Sam, still asleep, shifted slightly out of his grasp. Sorry, sweetheart. Brant shifted to give her more space. His phone rang again. Casting a worried look at Sam, Brant slid upward to sit against the wall, cell phone in hand. Hello. Captain Johansson's next words had Brant hopping out of bed to the far side of the room. He stopped in front of the window. What? He hissed. Brant shook his head at the next piece of information. He what? What the hell was he thinking? Yet he says he didn't give them her picture and name. Brant, remembering Sam was still asleep, took several deep breaths. Do you believe him? Brant, tucking the phone against his shoulder, quickly pulled on his briefs and jeans. Trying not to wake Sam, he walked downstairs and into the kitchen. The captain's heavy sigh was unmistakable. Yes. I do. He's an idiot, mostly a harmless one. Do you have a picture of her in the file? No, I don't. Right, and he wouldn't have gone to the trouble of digging one out. He's too damn lazy for that. Chances are someone else did it. I just don't know who yet. The station did admit this information came from a different source than the one who provided the ring, which confirms Dylan's story. Christ, what a mess. Knowing the captain agreed didn't help any. Brant, you know what has to happen. I'll deal with Dylan. You have to get her to a safe house. Brant laughed a short, angry bark. That's not as easy as it sounds. She won't be happy. To hell with keeping her happy. At this point, I'm only concerned with keeping her alive. If she won't come willingly, you know what to do. The captain rang off, leaving Brant glaring at the phone in his hand. Someone had deliberately put Samantha in danger. Whoever had done this might as well have pointed a gun at her head and pulled the trigger himself. What if that was exactly what this asshole intended? Deputy Brooker came to mind. The more Brant thought on it, the more his suspicions grew. It shouldn't be too hard to pick him up. Adam had been working on tracking where he was staying earlier today. Brant quickly made a couple phone calls. Within minutes, an APB was put out on the vehicle, and Adam was heading into the office to pull a photo off the database to circulate as well. Then he'd take the photo to the newsroom to confirm Brant's suspicions. Could anyone else have done this? Sam said only a few people knew about her skills. After today's mess at work, that select few had grown considerably. Several of those might have wondered about her skills before, not after today. God damn it. He highly doubted Kevin would have done something like this, particularly after seeing Sam in action today. Besides, he would never put the department at risk. What won't make me happy? Startled, Brant turned around to find Sam, with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, leaning against the doorway. Tousled and tiny, she appeared so lost that Brant couldn't help himself. He walked over, tugging her into his arms. He didn't want to tell her. Brant grimaced. No way around it. She had to know. That was the captain. One of our detectives has fessed up to telling the media that you were helping the police with this case. He swears that's all he said. But on the news tonight, there was a little more to it than that. Exactly how much more was there? Her voice was quiet, too quiet. So were her eyes. His heart sank. She already knew. Your name and picture. She froze. Brant rubbed her back soothingly. It's okay. I won't let anything happen to you. Stiff and unyielding, Sam didn't answer. After a few moments, Brant tilted her chin so he could gaze into her eyes. Searching deep, he tried to find out what she was thinking. Her eyes were frozen blanks. Oh God, Sam. I am so sorry. Brant tugged her closer, rocking her gently in his arms. Captain Johansson wants you to go to a safe house, where we can keep an eye on you. Sam shook her head vehemently. I'm not going. Brant winced. I'm afraid it's not a choice. Sam reared up, glaring at him. Brant, damn his hormones, couldn't resist noticing the gentle sway of her breasts. Now that he knew what those god-awful sweaters covered up, he wholeheartedly approved of them. He didn't want every other male getting an eyeful. Christ, she was gorgeous when she was mad. Peachy tones flushed her normally pale skin, giving her a lively bloom that was so often missing from her skin. Like hell. You can't force me, she declared defiantly. He sighed and tried to tug her against him, only she was having nothing to do with it. Actually, I can, but I don't want to have to. He shifted slightly, realizing his body's interest in her nude state wouldn't be received well at the moment, knowing he could do damn little about it. Sam, be reasonable. The killer now knows who you are, and it won't take him long to find where you live. Do you realize what you've done? It's not just the killer. It's my job and my friends. Sam stopped, a stunned look on her face. She snorted. Okay, so they may not be friends in the forever sense, but they were friendly to me. Why is it I'm only just understanding what that means, now that I'm about to lose them? Not everyone will see the news. Sam snorted. This is a small town. Whoever doesn't see the news will be told by 9 a.m. tomorrow. She was probably right. That doesn't mean they will treat you any differently. Besides, he couldn't let anything else matter. She had to stay safe. Nothing else was acceptable. Fine tremors ran through her. I don't think I can live here if I'm an outcast again. Brant ran his fingers through his hair. He couldn't imagine what her life had been like up to now. She'd built herself a life here. He didn't want her to lose that. I can understand how you feel. An angry laugh escaped. Can you? Brant felt the slow burn he'd stomped on earlier start to flare up. Her anger was nothing in comparison. He couldn't let it be. This was beyond serious. She had to leave, and now. Staring out into the black of night, he realized they didn't have much time. The killer could already have found her location and be on his way. He voiced his thoughts. You have to consider that he could be on his way right now. Sam aged before him. His heart went out to her. I'm sorry, Sam. But this is the way it has to be. Sam blurted out, the animals. I can't take them to a safe house. Soldier needs this place as much as I do. To take him anywhere else will slow his rehabilitation, magnifying his trust issues if you take him away from his new home. She had a point, just a small one. He was concerned about her though, not the dog. Staying here is out of the question. Why? She interrupted. There's too much cover for a predator. It would be hard to defend. Not true, she answered, shaking her head. Someone could stay in the house with me. We don't want to use you for bait. He'll come looking for you, and you know that. If we take you to a safe house, he won't find you. Really? You mean until another detective leaks that information too? Thanks but no thanks. I didn't trust the police before, and the behavior out of your office hasn't changed my opinion one bit. Sam walked over to curl up on the farthest couch, with the blanket wrapped around her body. Sadly, he watched as those beautiful curves disappeared from view. Besides, if he can't find me, he'll just kill other women. You, her voice choked, or someone else has already set me up as bait. So you might as well make good use of the opportunity. Bitterness edged her tone. Shit. Brant sat down beside her. Sam, I'm wondering if this isn't part of Deputy Brooker's machinations. If the killer found you, it would be an easy solution to his problem. Sam shot him a considering look. A sweater lying over this couch caught her eye. Dropping the blanket to her waist, she pulled the sweater over her head, tugging it down under the blanket. Oddly enough, it was that action that made him suddenly very nervous. God damn it, Sam. I didn't set you up. You know what a media frenzy is like. Once they sniff out a story like this, there is no letting go. Thanks, but I don't need the reminder. Sam curled into a tiny ball and stared out into the night. June 23rd at 3:15 a.m. Now fully dressed, Sam curled up in a small ball in the corner of her preferred couch, where she could look out. Darkness still blanketed the valley, giving it an eerie glow. She wouldn't leave her home. The police had created this situation, so they could damn well fix it. She wasn't being stubborn, she was being sensible. They wanted to protect her, fine. They could do it here. Moses pushed his cold, wet nose against her arm. Hey boy. That's right, isn't it? We couldn't possibly move you and Soldier. He's just starting to adapt to this place as it is. She peered around at the simple room. This was her home, and she wasn't leaving. She knew better than most what this killer was capable of doing. Brant walked down the stairs. Her heart twanged. She didn't want to see him. She didn't like this sense of betrayal. If Brooker had done this, then it wasn't Brant's fault. Except he'd promised to keep her name out of this. Unfair or not, there it was. She geared up for the fight to come. Still, the feelings of resentment were hard to maintain as he walked toward her. Her nostrils flared. Her heart and mind flooded with images of last night. It couldn't be. She refused to be swayed by sweet memories. Damn it. Ruthlessly, she forced down tears. Brant gingerly stepped over the sprawled dog to sit on the couch with her. You may not be feeling very generous toward me at the moment. However, I need you to understand and believe in one thing. I didn't set you up. I couldn't do that to you. And I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. When she stared at him but stayed quiet, his shoulders sagged. Please, he whispered. Just believe in me, in us that much. We'll work out everything else. I promise. This time she couldn't hold back the tears. They pooled at the corner of her eyes, before slowly running down her cheeks. Burying her face in her arms, she tried hard to stifle the sniffles. When his arms wrapped around her, lifting her to his lap, the dam broke. Brant held her tight, murmuring nonsensical things in her hair. Finally her sobs ran down, until she rested quietly in his arms. Where did she go from here? How to go on? She'd lived so isolated for so long that she didn't think she could handle being pointed at and laughed at again. She shook her head slightly. Tough as that might be, losing Brant would be the worst. For the first time, she was experiencing this connection, this sense of belonging with another person. He fit like her other half, making her whole. Honestly, I don't think many people will recognize you. Apparently, it's an old picture. Sam stilled, then tilted her head. Did you read my mind? He smiled and dropped a tender kiss on her nose. No. I figure that's your department. She leaned against him, not sure how she felt anymore. She hadn't really thought he was to blame. That responsibility belonged with the asshole who'd released the information. Still, how much did she really know of Brandt? Sure, her mind mocked. You only know him well enough to have wild, uninhibited sex with him. Sam winced at the reminder. What's the matter now? Deciding to be honest, she answered, I'm realizing that I've only known you for a few days. His arms tightened. You know all that matters. She wondered about that. 6:10 a.m. Several sleepless hours later, Brandt walked into the kitchen, expecting, even spoiling for a fight. I hope you've reconsidered. She pulled the bread out of the toaster and buttered the 2 pieces, and didn't answer. I hope you're prepared to be reasonable. Brandt knew he should shut up, yet found himself aggressively defensive. He needed her to understand, to care about staying safe. She shot him a look. Reasonable? Take another look at what has happened to my life, then tell me that. Damn it, I have. I wouldn't have wished this on you for anything. But it doesn't change the facts. You have to be protected, and we have to catch this asshole. This could be the same guy I'm hunting, or it may be an entirely different asshole. I don't care, we have to get him off the street. You have to stay safe. His voice rose at the end of his sentence. He visibly struggled to regain control, but it was tough. She was fighting him over something that was inarguable. She finished buttering the toast on the plate, and carried it over to the table. I don't have a death wish, but I do want this to be over. I can't live in a bubble, and I must have some space for my... Out of words, Sam wafted her hand in the air. For my abilities, or whatever you want to call them. I can't live the same as everyone else. Don't you understand? These visions happen, and I don't know when they will. I have to feel safe in my world. Glancing around at the cabin, she added, it's not much, but it is home. I feel good here, rested. Being in the real world all the time hurts me. She paused briefly. I don't want to leave this place. Brandt leaned against the table, trying to give her a chance to express her needs. He didn't think she'd had much time or opportunity to have anyone care about what mattered to her. She turned to face him, her hand out in a beseeching way that wrenched his heart. Her voice continued the tug. I trust you to keep me safe, regardless of the problems with your department. But if I go to a safe house, I won't have an easy time of it. Sam reached out, covering his hand with her own. Brandt, I just want this over. I don't want anyone else to get hurt, including me. At the furious look on his face, she backed off slightly. I think you should use me as bait. Go ahead and involve Stefan. He has a great inner warning system, so use it. Seeing his mouth open to protest, she held up her hand to forestall him. But I will leave that up to you. Brandt placed his hand flat on the table and slowly sat down, deep in thought. She had a valid argument in terms of her abilities. She wasn't the same as everyone else. Was it unreasonable to force her to go to a safe house? No. However, it would be intolerable for her. He had his orders still. He straightened up and looked around the cabin, considering the location and the problems of guarding her here. Using her as bait was out of the question. A policewoman? Now that was possible. Stefan was also a hell of a good idea. He narrowed his eyes, considering her earnest face. He knew what he had to do. Right or wrong? All right. I'll talk to the captain. Maybe we can find another way. She turned to look at him in surprise. Really? At his nod, her smile burst free, warming and calming the fear inside him. Thank you. He smiled grimly at her. Don't thank me yet. The captain won't be happy, and may order you to be picked up regardless. Even if that means bringing you in for questioning, where we can hold you for 48 hours. She swallowed hard. I understand and thank you. Thank you for considering my needs. She shrugged. Maybe he'll understand. Brant didn't think so, but he'd made his decision, and he'd stand by it. But he wasn't looking forward to telling the captain. 10:15 a.m. Sam kept to the rear of the vet clinic as much as possible. It helped that business was brisk, and that plenty of animals needed her attention. It also helped her ignore the 6'4" security guard who stood just inside the door, watching her every move. He'd arrived at her house just before 7 this morning. Open-mouthed, she hadn't had time to protest. As this guy had walked in, Brant walked out. Not a good way to start the day. She tried to stay focused, and to give the animals a little extra of her time. These poor things needed a warm, caring voice and a shot of love. She needed to stay away from the chaos in her mind. Somehow she'd thought Brant would be the one to stay by her side. She stole a glance at the tall, silent ghost beside her. He'd introduced himself, shown her his ID, and had stayed quiet ever since. Watchful, ever-present, quiet. Sam, so used to silence, found his unnerving. Lucy pushed open the door and walked toward Sam. She cast a nervous glance at the man standing silently to the side. Sam, can you give us a hand? We need another person, for a moment. Sam nodded and followed her into the surgical ward. No animal was on the table. She turned around in confusion. What do you need help with? 3 women converged on her. Sam, are you okay? Why do you have a bodyguard? Was that you they were talking about on the news last night? Their questions came hard and furious. She stared from one to the other, more than a little overwhelmed. It didn't take long to realize their questions came from a place of caring. Dr. Wascott walked in. He headed straight for Sam, where he gave her a quick hug. I can't stay and talk. But you take care of yourself. That psycho could be after you. A wry smile lit Sam's face. That's why the bodyguard. OMG. The girl's excitement and fear melded and blended until sentiments were impossible to tell apart. It took several minutes of explanations before they finally ran down. They gave her a big hug each and ran back to their duties. Sam stood there bemused, a warm glow inside and out. So that's what having friends felt like. She could get used to this. 11:35 a.m. Plans, and more plans. He'd done what research he could. There was little enough to find. Bill hoped she was enjoying her celebrity status. Because soon he'd make her famous. He could see the headlines now, psychic who couldn't see what was coming. Served her right. He preferred to study his victims, to learn everything he could about them. That was the best part. He loved finding out where the women worked, who their friends were, and especially about the lovers they slept with. Every tidbit helped him to know them, just a little bit better. Once he'd collected all the little details, then he could choose the perfect time and method for her death. Not time for all this now. He couldn't take the chance. She also didn't fall into the same category as the other women. They were chosen. She was just an irritation to be taken care of. He smiled. Cutting her brake line would be too easy. He already knew that she owned an old Nissan truck. He'd found that out within minutes of hearing her name. He used that method sometimes, just not with the chosen ones. Besides, he couldn't guarantee the success like he needed to now. Many people deserved death. Not every one of them deserved his personal attention. Sometimes men needed killing too. His old boss was one of them. The asshole had the audacity to fire him. Bill didn't like the damn job anyway. He frowned. That reminded him. That asshole had escaped. His damn girlfriend had borrowed his Mercedes, dying in his place. His stomach soured. Now he'd be sure to take care of that bastard personally. But Bill had more pressing issues to take care of first. Parksville was only a few miles away. The psychic wouldn't know what hit her. The cops were particularly stupid. She'd be placed under police protection, and the cops would be waiting for him. Bill was too smart for that. His mind spinning with ideas, he couldn't help but appreciate the extra challenge. It definitely added a little spice to brighten up his day.